All right, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Driving Hybrid and Multi-Cloud Deployments webinar brought to you by Otava. We've got a really great lineup for you this evening, or this morning, excuse me, if you can go to the next slide. Today you're going to hear from myself. I'm Sydney Diedrich, the Director of Marketing here at Otava, as well as Bruce Appling, our Senior Solutions Architect, and Chad St. Thomas, our Solutions Architect at Otava as well. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Bruce to talk about the next slide.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Bruce Appling, I'm Senior Solutions Architect, as Sydney said. Been in the field for about 20 years, from admin to engineering to architecture. Went with Otava for about 6 years. Really happy to be here today.
And Chad, you can go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Chad St. Thomas. I've been with Otava 3 years now, and I've been in the industry, especially continuity and infrastructure, for the good 10 years or so, and looking forward to getting to talk to everybody today.
Now I'll hand it over to Bruce.
All right, so today we're talking about hybrid cloud and multi-cloud. In that context, right, digital transformation is a very complex environment. Over the last, IT in general, the field has gotten more and more complex. There's more and more options. There's more and more nodes. There's more and more types of services, types of applications. There's more and more ways to do just about anything than there ever has been, and that's only increasing on a year by year, if not month or day by day basis. And so in my tenure in the IT field, I've seen everything go from, wanting the biggest, baddest physical server, right, on your local environment to virtualization, where you want to have the highest workload density possible, and then into the cloud. And now we're trying to do things with hybrid cloud, right, where we have some stuff on-prem, some stuff possibly at a private cloud provider and a public cloud provider, as well as into hyperscalers. It just gets overwhelming to a lot of companies and IT teams, and putting together a hybrid cloud that is valuable is a required component, right? In order to do that, you have to identify what workloads fit best in what environment. And that's really the most important decision you can make, because that's going to influence your capital expenditure, your operational expenditure. It's going to influence, how much time you are supporting it, right? So making intelligent choices around how your hybrid cloud is built and what workloads land in which areas is a critical portion in any IT team's work planning, let's say, and cloud planning and digital transformation.
And that definitely carries us off into multi-cloud workloads as well. And that's kind of a good point. You mentioned that now we've gotten to that point where now we have hybrid solutions. Things are in private infrastructures, public cloud, that sort of deal. But then having to worry about, I have this great application that we've developed internally, but the on-prem solution or even the hybrid solution can't scale at the rate that maybe you're scaling at now, or even the potential scale that you're looking at in the future. And that's kind of a big part of how things have, moved forward, and how we're kind of continually growing into different workload options, and having the ability to field out, okay, well, now I need to be ready to scale out at any moment's notice, be able to scale that and be properly ready so that we're not behind the curve, but ahead of the curve. And having that ability to do so in a multi-cloud environment allows you to pick what sort of workload works best in, whatever workload environment that was required for, like Google Cloud, AWS, Azure, because not everything is created equal. And depending on what your workloads are, you're going to have to adjust and figure out on an application level what goes with what and what can properly serve your needs, growing and being able to scale that and have the ability to build infrastructure and support it within a metrics that allows you to continually grow your business and not have to be stuck wondering what's next, but you're already ahead of that and you already know what's next and be able to build that going forward.
Yeah, and then even beyond the multiple clouds today, we have we have to start considering things like edge nodes and internet Internet of Things, right? All the remote devices and even of course all the native applications now and reformatting things to be cloud native and containerized and so on and so forth. So the complexity just is almost unending. And you can see, so the percentages on the screen are just leading to more and more difficulty for IT teams to be able to cope across the board with all of them. So,
there we go.
Next slide.
Yep. And so when we're talking our hybrid cloud objectives, we really have to think kind of how you're going to be able to use those use cases to be able to, actually figure out where you're going to go with your workloads or how you're going to manage everything going forward so that you can continually grow and make all of that happen. So like, for example, at least in the top three, it's a really easy way to talk about it because cost optimization, obviously, every cent, every dollar is watched very heavily. You don't want to be having a workload environment that you already have set up, you have a budget for, and then you have to go back to the same people and go, you know what, actually, I need another 50 grand, right? That never ends well. It never creates any, cohesiveness whenever you're talking to your controller or anyone else that would, make sure that you have the proper budget set up so that you can actually continue to grow and optimize your workloads. And that kind of extends down into the on-premise environments without the capital expense, right? Especially in the world we live in pre and post-COVID, it's getting harder and harder to find and source components and get those things actually delivered to you in a time so that you can actually, move forward with your actual business rather than being, 3-6 weeks in going, well, we haven't even got our blades delivered. So what are we going to do? It allows you to instantly expand, instantly scale, and build off whatever you already have existing and continue growing rather than always having to be asking yourself, what am I going to do next, right? And then that carries us off really easily into offsite location for, DRaaS and continuity in general. If you haven't figured out what your continuity plan is, you probably should, right? On top of compliance, that's growingly becoming a part of continuity, as well as ransomware, right? That's a big key part of, does you have to worry about, legacy users that don't understand how easy it is to allow others into your data centers or into your data matrices and allowing others to see things that they probably should be seeing, right? As well as being able to understand that, if your on-prem environment gets compromised, it might take you 6 weeks, it might take you a month, it might take you, who knows how long it'll take to regain those networks or regain those servers and all of that stuff to be able to continually move forward. And like I said, if you haven't thought about that plan, you should definitely consider thinking about getting that going.
Yeah, and that complexity, right? As IT professionals, right, our goal is to provide the users with a good experience of applications that perform at a level that they expect, so that they can do their jobs, right? We want to make sure that we're enabling our users, whoever that may be, internal, external, to be able to perform their job function without the IT infrastructure or the IT workloads, inhibiting them in any way. And we want to do that, but we have cost restraints, right? We have OpEx and CapEx restraints, and the more complex things get, the harder it is for us as IT professionals to manage those in a cost-effective way, right? And so that's why you see, I think, cost at the top of this list, don't you think, as the biggest reason for hybrid cloud being driving initiatives, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean,
we have to use it smartly.
Yeah, exactly. Because really, cost drives pretty much the rest of everything going down. Because if you can't manage your costs properly, you can't grow. You can't do anything that's under there. You can go to the next slide. Perfect. So this kind of carries us off into what people's actual hybrid cloud objectives are whenever they're thinking, how do I get from cost optimization? How do I get from extending the IT capacity down to actually moving forward with that strategic development and getting yourself actually into that hybrid or multi-cloud environment. And a lot of people, when asked, this is kind of what we're looking at here, how are they actually thinking and strategically going about making the organization IT, be able to expand and being able to grow, on top of having what does that hybrid implementation look like, and have you been thinking about it, right? Because if you haven't been thinking about it, and this is the first time you're really considering all of this, these are going to be the sorts of questions that you're going to be asking yourself, like, oh, I have all of these on-premise and off-premise, servers. What workloads do I need to move to a multi-cloud or a hybrid cloud environment? Because maybe the on-prem solution just simply isn't working for you anymore. And the bottom part of this is kind of letting you know that on an enterprise level, there are people who are already more or less at the point of execution, already deciding what formal strategy needs to be in place to be able to continually grow and be able to truly understand that you can't just kind of fly by the seat of your pants anymore. You have to be prepared. You have to be ready. And so that if you don't have a plan, as we can already see on this one, it's only, people who don't have or don't know is less or about 10% of the core group that was asked this question, because, the idea here is if you're not going to plan, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the problem is there's a lot of what we would call barriers to entry into properly utilizing hybrid cloud solutions. Just about every environment has what we would call technical debt around either infrastructure or primarily around applications is the most important when talking about a cloud solution or cloud migration endeavor. And you can see on that first statistic, right? It takes on average 7.4 years. That's 7.4 years. That's 3/4 of a decade, right? I mean, that's a long time to refactor, right? 100 applications. Now you might say, I don't have 100 applications, I have to refactor, but even refactoring a fraction of that, even refactoring 10, is likely to be a huge endeavor. And the smaller you are, the smaller company is, the less likely you're going to have those resources on staff, that expertise on staff, right? And the larger you are, the more applications you're probably going to have to refactor. So it is the refactoring process is not a small endeavor that you can jump into without a significant planning, right? And that's part of where people begin to fail when they're looking at a cloud strategy, I think, is that they think that, this is going to be a 1-year endeavor or a 6-month endeavor, or in some cases you maybe even a 2 or 3-year endeavor isn't realistic, right? They're not. You have to look well beyond short-term projects in order to have a strategy. But at the same time, things are changing constantly, right? In the IT field, right? There's new ways of doing things, new options in different clouds, right? Different providers, and so it has to be a flexible plan, but it has to be a long-reaching and realistic plan, because you can't just stop everything else you're doing, right? You still have to support the ongoing business in order to continue forward, but you have to have a plan on how you're going to move forward for the long run. And part of that, like I said, a lot of smaller companies aren't going to have the expertise on staff, and that is a barrier in and of itself, because there's actually not a lot of there's a shortage, I should say, of those skill sets out there right now, and it's even worse now than it was a couple of years ago. Quite frankly, I mean, with COVID, you would think more people would be getting into things like remote work development and application development and so forth. But unfortunately, while that's true, the demand has far exceeded the growth of that skill set. And so it's actually getting worse. This 90% is probably out of date, quite frankly. It might even be 95% or higher at this point. And if you do it wrong, all of this can add up to increased costs, which kind of contradicts the goal of driving a hybrid cloud strategy, right? The number one goal of a hybrid objective of a hybrid cloud strategy is to lower your costs, right? To provide better experience for your clients at an equal or lower cost, right? That's the number one goal. But if you do it wrong, with poor planning or with poor execution, you can actually end up with higher costs and the same and equal experience, or possibly worse. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and some of those are outlined here. But it's the biggest part of it is that we're not set up to refactor applications, right? Most companies are not set up to refactor applications, and they just don't know how, and they don't have the skill set, and they weren't built to be cloud native today. And that is a huge barrier, right? And the question is, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, I can even add to that just a little bit while we're going to the next slide. Is on top of having all of that, like especially whenever multi-cloud environments started coming to the forefront of everything, everyone was really excited to just jump in and kind of get going. But things like ingress and egress might not even been on someone's on their radar before, and then they get hit with that bill and they're like, oh darn it, I have to rethink how I did this, because maybe they put a workload into the cloud that maybe doesn't have any business being there, because it's not really crucial to having cloud native apps or being able to grow from a development standpoint, right? That having to rethink that and kind of come back and understanding that, the higher risk of having the shortage in skill sets, especially with COVID really just kind of ramped it up way higher than the amount of kids coming out of school right now with those skill sets ready to go, right? In terms of building that out and being specific to having those costs analyzed, ready to go, so that you can minimize that risk going forward.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the question is, how do you get rid of those risks, right? How do you avoid those pitfalls, right? And the goal, you should really have, number one, take the easiest path first, right? Don't try to take on all of the refactoring and reskilling and retooling everything up front, right? Move the easiest workloads first. That's where you're going to get your biggest bang for the buck, right? Part of the cost problem of people's failed migrations to cloud environments is usually that there's a lot of starting and stopping, right? Because they try to take on too big of a chunk or too big of a step at the beginning. And so they're trying to refactor all of their applications all at once. We're trying to do everything all in one big step. I have a client, a large automotive global supplier, that we've been working with them for 3 years, and they have really only finished the very easiest portion of their migration. They have years to go before they will have all of their stuff in a cloud solution. And they've only taken, like I said, they've taken that easy win first, and it's taken them 3 years, right? Now, granted, if you're not as big as them, maybe it won't take you 3 years to take that first step, but that is the best path forward. You want to de-risk your chances of starting and stopping and losing that expenditure, right, on the wrong path, the wrong solution, by taking the easy lift and shift, the easiest portions of your workload to the cloud first, and doing it in a way that uses a similar architecture, right? So that's part of the multi-cloud strategy that Ottava has, and leveraging our partners with VMware is to leverage as similar technologies as possible using a multi-cloud approach, right? So that we can provide you managed services, right? Our clients and our partners managed services on in various environments, leverage hyperscalers, leverage our own internal public and private clouds, right? And you can do the same. That all using an interface that you're probably already familiar with, right? Most IT professionals are using VMware, or have used VMware, or Hyper-V. Possibly those are the two most common cloud or virtualization softwares in use across the industry. And if you can do a lift and shift of your simple workloads from VMware to VMware, it's a quick win. You save yourself a lot of work, and then you come back and start on the slower, heavier lifts over time, right? And that's how you really try to reduce your risk when taking on a cloud migration goal.
Yeah, and that's exactly kind of how it kind of carries into this slide in terms of kind of what Bruce was mentioning. You have really extreme large tenants that have enterprise level servers, and a lot of times the planning phase can be a long and tenuous process, and then actually executing that can also be the same. But especially when we're talking small to mid-sized businesses, it doesn't have to be like that. A lot of times, and especially you can see here on the traditional app side, a lot of times it can be something as simple as, oh, we're sunsetting an application server and we're going to need to move this workload somewhere else, whether it be buying new infrastructure, getting a public cloud, private cloud, or multi-cloud environment. And it's really easy to then rehost those applications. And it might just be something as simple as, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and move these SQL servers over to Azure, have them communicate back to my my on-premise applications that I'm using to log all those transactions and actually kind of build better my business. And a lot of times, for some people, they find out that, oh, I don't have this CapEx cost anymore, on top of which, whenever I do the math, this is actually cheaper for me because, I'm paying for the connection in and out, but I'm not really having to do a whole lot other than that. And it actually brings your overall cost drastically down, so that whenever you're going and scaling, you're actually scaling with your growth rather than having to buy, a very large server that's just going to, in 3 years, maybe I'll have used all of the resources on this blade, but chances are you probably won't. You'll use half of it. And you got somebody asking, well, what are we going to do with this? You don't have to be worrying about any of that. You're literally just going to be paying for what you're using. And that allows you to easily scale so that you're using what you need at all times. And you're never having to get charged for something that you're just completely leaving there in the dark. And then that kind of carries us off into kind of the new thought, the new way that everyone's trying to do stuff is have pretty much completely cloud native applications so that they can have the ability to scale at a moment's notice, right? Maybe one day, you're carrying a certain amount of MRR, but next week you just completely explode because you're on the news or just some random viral video or just something that kind of generates business in a way that you're not completely ready for. But on the cloud native side, it's going to be very easy to expand all of that information and get yourself to be able to refactor that specific application. And it might even be that rather than having your development teams on-prem having to do all of their stuff on-premise, you could have them completely doing cloud native application development, so that on your side, you're paying a whole lot less for your CapEx costs, on top of giving them the ability to not be concerned about, oh, well, how am I going to grow this? Or how am I going to be able to expand my resources whenever I need to go and create a test server so I can get this ready for production, right? And then be able to retire any of the applications and the on-prem services you were using prior to, and be able to move to a SaaS environment so that you're more or less pulling in those transactions all the time, and not be even scared that, oh, if a hurricane comes, I'm not going to be pulling transactions anymore, on top of losing all of that data. Now I got to be worried about getting back up. And something that, in the time that I've worked in the continuity field, the average outage for most businesses is around $60,000, and that's on the low end. And that's a general number that, Veeam and some other product lines, they came out there, they all came around the same, or 60 to 65,000. And that's on a pretty much the entire outage costs you that much money. And rather than being concerned with these factors, you could just eliminate them entirely, right? You could have the ability to be, hosting all of your businesses in Florida. But, I got all my service stacks in Seattle. I'm not even concerned when hurricane season comes. I'm already ready to go. And so that kind of carries us off into, the application server side, having the access and design, right? Having the ability to identify those apps and flows and be able to, build security around those, have that north and south covered, and then you can focus on east and west, right? And make sure that you're able to more or less have that ready to go. So whenever you get onto the, the next phase, connect and migrate, you're already pretty much ready to go.
Identifying the biggest hitters first, right? The most impactful things to migrate first. And that includes, right, both the easiest, and then move on to the biggest, like on the last slide Joe was talking about. If you refactor applications, you don't necessarily have to refactor all of them, right? Some of them just wouldn't make sense ever to refactor possibly. You want to identify which ones are the most critical or will have the biggest impact on your business, and on the performance of your business and the performance of your user base or your client base, and take those on first, and then possibly move on to the lower impacting ones. Possibly not. It might just not make sense from a resource cost standpoint.
Right, and that easily carries off into that secure and protect. I kind of foreshadowed here a little bit earlier in terms of having those security policies in place so that you're already ready to go. You're not, more or less concerned about how you're going to keep your business continuity if something were to happen. You're already prepared, right? And that's something like where we get into zero trust and having that ability to understand that from a security perspective nowadays, with COVID, it seemed to ramp this up even more, that the idea is I can't start from a completely open firewall and kind of build down. We want to start thinking about this from an opposite direction, is I want nothing in here, and then I need to build outwards to whatever I can actually allow into my networks, and then covering the rest of it with, if I have all this certain sets of ports open because my application servers use them, I can be more focused on securing those ports as opposed to having, each port kind of closed down till you get down to that fine, nice, okay, I feel safe with this type of business continuity, right?
Yeah, and a lot of cloud migrations, I talked about the starting and stopping, stall at around step 3 here, right? Before that, optimize and automate, not operate and scale, and that's where the cost becomes flips upside down, let's say, right? So instead of saving money by going to cloud native and by going to cloud solutions, you end up spending more money because a lot of people never get to the optimize and automate step, and that's where you can get your savings, right? So it's an important piece to make sure that you have planned to go all the way through the process and not just stop with, okay, I'm up and running, right? And everything's secure and I can access my applications and my clients are getting service, but you realize later you're losing more money, right? You're spending more money than you should be because you never actually came back and went through that optimization and automation standpoint. That's where you can save. That's where you can save the money, and it's important stuff that you plan ahead for that, and goes back to only working on the most impactful things first, right? Because if you try to do optimize and automate on your entire environment all at once, it's unlikely to be successful. You need to be focusing on those high impact workloads, and then you'll have the time and resources to finish the entire process out.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that kind of brings me back, and I'm going to keep saying this over and over, is scalability, right? That's extremely important nowadays, especially when we're talking into the multi-cloud environment or even edge computing and things that we're going to be looking towards the future, right? Is if you're not thinking about or asking yourself, is what I'm doing now scalable? And if it is scalable from what your perspective is, okay, well, define what that scalability actually means. Because if you think that, oh, I'm going to go buy a new server and that's your idea of scalability, you're going to find yourself when you go to buy that server that's not as scalable as you thought, because maybe, finding that infrastructure or building said infrastructure, because, with the way things are going now, it might even be where you have all this perfectly laid out plan, you have a perfect, supplier for all of your stuff. But then the guy who sets up all your servers decides to, he's going to go on vacation for 6 weeks during the middle of your grand plan, right? Or, they have a kid or something, things that you can't actually plan for, right? But you can plan for scalability. And if you have the ability to know that, oh, I can go to a hybrid cloud environment, or I can go to a multi-cloud environment, or even beyond cloud, you will be more prepared for what your next steps will be when you have, additional variables come to play, down the road, because you can't plan for everything. That's something, COVID is a prime example of that, right? No one expected a global pandemic, but look what happened, right? If somebody asked you 2 years ago, do you see yourself seeing a new flu that's going to take over the entire globe? You're like, get out of my face. That's ridiculous. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. Well, we lived through it, right? So the idea here is making sure that you have the ability to prepare yourself for what things you don't know are going to happen down the road.
Yeah, the scalability point I think is critically important. Early in my career, I had a CEO who always said that the success is planned, and no matter how big you planned a scale for something, if you took it to him and say, oh, we can scale 10 times, he'd say, well, what happens when we grow 100 times? If you took it to him and said, oh, we can scale the solution 100 times, he said, well, what happens when we scale 1,000 times, right? And that's what you have to think about, right? Because if you aren't planning for that possibility of scale, you're limiting your ability to grow in the future, right? And none of us ever want to, as IT professionals, want to limit the ability of our company or our clients to scale because we didn't plan ahead for that possibility.
Oh yeah, I mean, think of Zoom as a prime example. You think if Zoom was 100% an on-prem environment, they'd be able to grow to the scale they grew during the pandemic? No, not even
Right.
remotely. The cloud environments that they pre-built allowed for them to scale to where they are today, and obviously because now, webinars and things like we're doing now are completely critical to the business model as opposed to 2 years ago. It was kind of like, we do those every now and again.
Right.
And so this kind of carries off into, we kind of, glossed over a little bit here, but it kind of carries into identifying on a per application basis or on a per server basis, what hybrid or multi-cloud environment might be best suited for your business, right? Because it's not a one size fits all. That's actually a benefit to you because, between Google, Azure, and Amazon, they're all competing for your business. They all want to know, what I can specialize for my end user environment to allow them to have, better SQL response, or, oh, I have, all of my network gear running over here. Having specific things to better suit your business so that whenever you're going and looking at a multi-cloud environment, you're not going, okay, I just have Azure, right? It's not, there's not just a single one place you have to go. You have options. And making them compete for your business is what gives you the ability to innovate and get to the places that you want to go with your business. And we start talking edge computing and things like that. We're in this new frontier of, well, now multi-cloud just simply isn't enough anymore for some people, right? And especially in the security business, multi-cloud environment just isn't going to cut the bread whenever it comes to transforming and bringing in so much data that you can't have to be able to process it when ingress and egress isn't enough for you. Edge computing tend to be where you go, right? And being able to specifically source out, this is what I need. And oh, great, there's already someone who's doing what I need. So I just need to move my, workload to that environment and I'll be set.
Yeah, each of these have their strong points, and I'll say, some possible weak points, right? And so you want to be flexible enough to be able to leverage all of the above, right? And that goes back to the scale discussion, right? You don't want to limit your possibility of growth by being too tied to one particular provider or one particular platform, but you want to be able to leverage all of them. And that's Otava's vision as well as a provider, right? And we can go to the next slide here. This is, Otava can assist with that, right? As a stepping stone, right? That's our vision of cloud as well, is that we can leverage both our internal infrastructure, your internal infrastructure, right, for your premise base, edge compute cloud nodes, right, that we can provide, deploy, or you may already have yourself, as well as all the hyperscalers and any future hyperscalers and any SaaS base, right, and all of those can be brought under one umbrella, one management solution, ideally one pane of glass, as the saying goes, one common interface that you can monitor and manage everything, or as much as possible manage and monitor everything. Then you're not spending more money having your resources have to get trained and understand and support 50 different environments, right? 12 different tools. They're in one environment, but they're leveraging the resources across all of the cloud nodes, whether it's private, whether it's internal, whether it's public, whether it's hyperscaler, whether it's edge, or anything else. They're supporting it as one instance, one environment, and they don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure, and you don't have to spend the cost, the capex or the opex, to build and maintain a lot of that yourself. You pay for only what you use. You pay for only the features you want and need, right? And you don't have to, as Chad talked about earlier, you don't have to build out, large services, large servers, large hardware purchases that you won't fully utilize for, possibly ever in its usage. So
exactly, and it kind of brings me to something I was thinking about is, whenever you're going and you're purchasing something on Amazon's website, if you went and hit add to cart and it took you 15 minutes to get through that checkout process, you're probably not going to be buying that product. You're going to go find somewhere else where you can get a one-click go and I can be done. That's the same thing that translates to your business as well. If somebody's on your website trying to find and buy your services and they're having to wait 5 minutes for a web page to propagate, or a certain survey to send out, or they never get an email because that server's too inundated with requests, that's not going to be able to move your business forward. It's actually going to hold you back. And that's just an easy mentality to think about, is when these hyperscalers come into play, it's mainly to make everything as snappy and instantaneous as possible. We live in a world of instant gratification. And, I feel like we talked about instant gratification before hyperscalers. And now it's like, I need instant gratification, right? And that's what people want. They want it now. They don't want to wait 5 minutes. They wanted it 10 seconds ago when they even thought it up.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. People used to be happy with a website that loads in 3 seconds, and now they expect it to load in like 3 microseconds, right? There's studies on these things that talk about exactly that. And you're absolutely right, that instant gratification, but it's important also that you don't limit yourself, right? You want to take advantage of all the technologies in the best way possible for your use case, and not limit yourself in the future.
Agreed.
And that's really where Otava comes in. We are, that's our view as well. We're a stepping stone. We're a stepping stone to help you be able to leverage all of those services, right? We are a hybrid cloud provider. We are moving more and more. We are moving towards even providing more hybrid options, right? Leveraging the hyperscalers even more. We are moving towards providing more unified experience across all those hypervisors, all those hyperscalers and hypervisors for our clients and for our partners, so that you can maximize your return on your usage of that, right? And that's what we're here for. Our cloud is our particular in the private and public cloud offerings. We offer them in a number of models to be flexible for your use cases. We offer shared cloud, which is entirely usage-based, no commitment, no contracts, right? Scale up, scale down as much as you want, and pay for only what you use. We also offer it as if your businesses or your workloads are a bit more stable, we offer reserve cloud, where you can be guaranteed higher availability resources, and for minimum commitments, you get possibly better price points. And then if you're required for either compliance reasons or for your own internal security, or just from a workload resource requirement standpoint, we can provide fully private clouds as well on dedicated hardware. And then coming soon, right? Leveraging hyperscalers as well, right? So that will be that's a tease for you, but I can't talk too much about it, otherwise Sydney might cut me off and never let me do one of these again. But coming soon, right? You'll be able to leverage beyond Otava, beyond our private and public cloud, and onto the hyperscalers across the world as well.
And I completely agree with Bruce. And it kind of brings me to this idea here is we've talked about it over and over in terms of planning and getting yourself ready. What we're also telling you at the same time is you're not alone. You have Otava, you have us to be able to help get you to those points, right? Because maybe doing it on your own, it might put you at a 1 to 2 year implementation compared to you bring, me and Bruce in, and now we got you up and running in 6 weeks or something even, faster. It really just depends on what you need and how we can allow you to, fully realize your goals and be able to build a solution that gives you exactly what you're looking for, and being able to truly, get to that point of scale where you're telling yourself, I'm more excited about where we're going with this rather than trying to figure out what you're going to do with it, right? And, it kind of brings us down to those cloud outcomes, kind of like we're looking at here, having that reduced complexity. And, a lot of times, especially, 10, 15, 20 years ago, if you wanted to go on a computer and you needed to do something, the UI you're looking at is not great, and your user experience is very poor. Thank God that we've, grown as a society, and user experience has actually become important. And having simple user experience models allows for you to, scale, add VMs just at the click of the button, rather than having to go and pre-build resources and getting those set up, which obviously carries you on to improving your business agility, which, more or less allows you to blueprint your scale and have yourself at that point of, I am ready to scale up. I don't have to wait 10 weeks for a server to come in. I'm already ready to go. We've scaled up. We're already continuing business, but now we're continuing business at a higher rate than we were previously expecting, which eventually comes down to controlling costs. So that way now you know that I don't have to have all this CapEx cost going into servers, having to, constantly renew your support and having to consistently think of, what's the next thing that this thing is going to, bring onto the table as far as cost wise, right? Because, you have hardware failures. There's a whole slew of things that, if you can just completely eliminate that from the equation, on top of controlling costs, you're minimizing your planning costs going forward as well. And that kind of gives you also the ability then to delegate control on a self-service level or even at a managed level. Because maybe you're saying, these are all great things, but I don't want to do any of it. Well, great. You don't have to. You can make somebody else do it for you, and you just get the pretty nice shiny box and you get to continue your business, but with the new shiny thing that, carries you forward rather than having to be focused on, well, how am I actually going to do this, right? And then that kind of gets you down to that, manageability and, having that backup and continuity side. Because then you also have to then continue to ask yourself, well, what happens if X doesn't, come to full realization, right? Having the ability to pivot at a moment's notice, regain your data, regain your network, regain whatever, and be able to instantly shift and more or less continue business rather than being focused on, a 6-week or a 10-week or a, 1-year ransomware attack that's keeping you from being able to scale, keeping you from continually able to grow.
Yeah, because these are kind of the flip side of the barriers we talked about earlier, right? This is how you wanna. This is what you want to come out of your well planned and well executed cloud initiative, right? It's not you don't want to increase costs. You want to control your costs and be able to plan for your costs. You don't want to have increased complexity, which is a barrier that a lot of people face, right? So this is really an important point that you focus on the outcomes and drive towards the outcomes, not just the technical solution all the time, right? Because it's more the technical solution is part of the business outcome, and a lot of times we as IT professionals might overlook those business outcomes a little bit too quickly because we're focused on engineering or building the perfect IT solution, and that's only part of it. So and that's part of what Chad and I do day in and day out is sit with customers and prospects and people who have projects and talk through business problems and business requirements and business goals and figure out what solutions, what offerings, what products, what paths can be taken in order to deliver the desired outcomes from where they are today.
Yeah, and really, thanks, Bruce, and thanks, Chad. I really appreciate the insight into this topic here on hybrid and multi-cloud deployments. And when we talk about hybrid multi-cloud deployments, we started off with this notion of it's so complex and how do we go about it? And we gave you the why and we gave you the what, but really when we talk about the how comes down to choosing the right cloud partner. And that's really what Otava is here for you to be. We focus heavily on customer experience and customer service and ensuring that we are that cloud partner for our customers through any sort of hybrid cloud transition or cloud transition in general. We've been in business since 1994, and we have a very specific strategy of evolving the changing tides of the market, right? I actually personally just came over from our acquisition of New Cloud Networks. So we are very focused on seeing where the trends of the market are going and putting together the best of breed technology so that we can leverage that for our customers and for our partners and move forward with them in the direction that their specific business is aiming to go for as well. So we offer everything from a managed services perspective to backup, disaster recovery, cybersecurity. We also dabble in co-location, professional services, and remote desktop as well. Little known fact on those sides there. But what really sets us apart as well is our focus on compliance. So Otava has done a really great job of serving our customers that are having a little bit more sensitive data that needs that extra level of security and compliance to satisfy whatever industry you're in. So we are HIPAA, HITRUST, PCI DSS, SOC 1, 2, and 3 compliant, as well as ISO. So these are really great compliances that we've taken the initiative of going down all of the audits and bringing on for you. And really, I think when we're talking about key takeaways here again, focusing on choosing a partner is going to be the essential differentiator in how you're setting up your strategy for multi-cloud and hybrid cloud deployments as well. And with that, I would like to invite everyone, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will answer those as they come in. And if you didn't get your question answered today, you can reach out to us directly at events@otava.com. You've heard a lot about us. You've heard a lot about hybrid cloud deployments, multi-cloud deployments, a little bit of the what and the how. And now I want to hear about your why. So if you want to take a moment to put a question in the chat or reach out to us, we're here for you and here to support you however we can. I'll take a moment to answer some of those questions that are coming through right now. It looks like I've had difficulty in the past with my digital transformation due to some legacy apps. How do I go about making that move with a legacy application? I'll throw that to Bruce and Chad.
I'll jump in real quick if that's all right, Chad. That kind of goes towards what we were talking about a little bit earlier, right? In some cases, it all depends on the legacy application. In some cases, it may not make sense to actually try to refactor that into a cloud native type solution. It may or may not, right? That needs to be analyzed on a case by case basis, right? That doesn't mean you can't have a cloud solution to help get you out of managing the hardware and large capital expenses. You certainly still can, but it may be more of an IaaS approach, right? And then it could be a multi-step process, right? So you have hardware issues that are causing you outages or problems or poor performance and so forth. And the first easiest lift step is to just migrate that in a lift and shift mode into a cloud provider such as Otava, and then look at possibly refactoring if it makes sense, right? And leveraging the cloud native tools. It might not. That's a case by case basis that has to be had on each almost in each application level, not just in each client approach.
Yeah, and just to add to what Bruce is saying, it might even be that we're moving everything else but the application server off to the cloud so that you can have those resources to scale that on-premise, because maybe that application isn't ready for a optimization to the cloud, or maybe it never will because you're trying to sunset this product, but you got to get moving on the rest of your infrastructure so that you can go on to the new things or whatever the new part of what you're doing. And it can be easy just to be, oh, you know what, let's move all this other stuff. Let's get all of that into the cloud so that I can focus on either expanding this on-prem environment within that application that, has that legacy stuff in it, or so that you can be more focused at, this is the last stack I have to get rid of. Now let me focus on how do I get rid of this rather than how do I move all of this, right? And that might be an easier or a different approach that we could definitely help assist with.
That's a really, really good point. It's very easy for us as IT professionals to get tunnel visioned on a problem, right? That this application or this infrastructure or this whatever is causing us problems, and therefore want to fix that problem. It's important that when you approach that, we look at it as a holistic environment, right? To figure out maybe that's not the piece that actually needs to be addressed. Maybe we address everything else, and that indirectly resolves your issue, right? So it's important to not get tunnel vision when we're looking at problems and especially when we're talking about things like cloud initiatives, that we look at it from a holistic level and not a micro level.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, on answering that one. Another one came through. How do I scale from hybrid cloud to multi-cloud? I have applications with different needs, and I don't know which cloud they work best in.
Right, I can go ahead and jump on this one. So that's exactly kind of what we were talking about earlier, and finding those specific workloads and determining, hey, maybe that's a great workload to put in AWS, or maybe that's a great, oh, I need to have this in a public cloud environment in VMware because maybe the Hyper-V or some other hypervisor using before just can't really keep up with the management side. That maybe that might be a huge pain point of your being able to scale and grow. And it might just be simply moving that into a hybrid cloud environment and then slowly moving off some of that into a multi-cloud environment and being able to find what, especially, and a lot of time that becomes the consultative part of what me and Bruce do, is finding out, hey, I got this, legacy server, or I have this application, I need to move it. But when I go in Google Azure, I go Google AWS, I'm not getting any information on what's going to be good for me, right? That's where, Bruce and I can actually fine tune and direct exactly where that needs to go, so that when we move that workload over to one of those multi-cloud environments or the hybrid cloud environment, you come out of that thinking, wow, I'm really glad I asked for that advice, because otherwise I would have been having it in another multi-cloud environment where it's not compatible, which is something we addressed earlier, is, doing it on your own might not be the best course of action because of incompatibilities that aren't really publicly labeled, because Microsoft and Amazon just want you to move it over, just move it over, right? They just want you to throw it over there. They don't care how, they don't care about you specifically. Allow us to care about you, allow us to care for what you need and how we can help you grow your business so that we can move things properly, so you're not stuck on an AWS or that you don't have any use for anymore.
Absolutely. How do I leverage multiple clouds? I'm struggling to ensure greater uptime and better reliability.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question. How do we leverage multiple clouds in order to increase uptime, right? Usually uptime is an issue with, I'll say it, old hardware, out-of-date hardware, or hardware that has problems, right? And right now, it's actually very, very hard to get replacement hardware, right? I had a client just recently who was having memory issues, right, on their physical server. There's absolutely no reason they shouldn't have been able to just change out the memory, right? They had some failed memory. We probably all experienced that in our IT life. And you just switched out the memory to a different DIMM, and guess what? It fixed the problem, right? The rest of the hardware wasn't that old. Problem is they couldn't get the memory, right? Just because the supply chain is so messed up, they couldn't get the memory, and therefore they were their entire not their entire stack, but their virtual environment that supported this application was not stable, right? They kept experiences, recurring outages over and over, right? And a lot of that comes to picking the right place to put the workload, right? Whether that's public, private, or hyperscaler, or internal, and then leveraging those infrastructures, right? Otava's cloud is highly redundant, multiple failure domain allowances, right? And the same is true in just about every cloud space. And so usually, if there is a problem with uptime, it's going to be either a hardware or an application, and you can address the hardware ones fairly easily, but the application ones might be a bit more troublesome.
Yep. Do we want to answer Jeffrey's questions first, Sydney? I saw one come in we got two here, Jeffrey and Takuya.
Yes. So Jeffrey has asked, what percentage of the cloud business is on AWS and Azure?
Yeah, so currently between Azure and AWS, they control about, it's 51% of the current market share as far as the cloud side is concerned, with 42% kind of being the, everything else. And then Google Cloud's got about 7% of the market share currently. And the bigger part of that is it's an ever-growing number. That 42%, that's probably a lot of people who just haven't been able to strategize and figure out where they're going to go. It might be something where you're telling yourself, well, this is what I need to do, but I have no idea what I'm going to do about this. And so that market share currently, is at 50%, but I highly doubt it's going to stay that low. It's probably going to be by 75% or more going forward. Probably by the end of next year, 2022, or even 2023, we'll see a huge market share shift. And that's kind of a really important key that, you don't want to get left behind, you might want to start planning now.
Awesome. And then another question that came in is what compliance regulations does Otava meet? And I did cover that on the last slide. So we are HIPAA, PCI, SOC 1, 2, and 3, high trust, as well as ISO compliant. And we are always looking for further compliances. So if you don't see one here, it's might be on the roadmap, and I won't make any promises on that, but do reach out if there are specific compliances that you would like to see or that you require that maybe aren't listed here, and we'll kind of give you an ETA on those.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. ISO 27001 is actually the direct result of a client asking us if we would go out and get that in order to assist them with their compliance requirements.
Yep. And then I think I see one question I'm just gonna shoot out there since I think Sydney just added it. Yeah, the on the application support side, I would think more generally on does, you know, I think the question is, does multi-cloud or hybrid cloud support application support environments? And a lot of times they do. And it really just depends on, especially if you're talking to your vendor on whatever application we're talking about, they might even be telling you, hey, don't be doing this on-prem. You guys should be doing this in a multi-cloud environment or a hybrid cloud environment, because you can't host our applications and have the manpower or the, you know, the actual resources to be able to support that application. And an important thing to consider is, especially kind of, well, again, we're coming back to the same stuff we talked about earlier, is what public cloud or what hybrid cloud or what multi-cloud environment is going to best suit my business. And that's something that me and, you know, Bruce and then the team at Otava, we can help you figure that out. We can help you figure out exactly where you need to go and making sure that we can minimize that cost going forward, so that, yeah, again, we can scale that business so that we can help grow with you, right? And we want to be able to be there for you whenever you come across any of those issues, or, you know, those solutions that need to come out by figuring out exactly what any of these multi-cloud environments can do for you. And so that we can, you know, specially tier those things for you, rather than, you know, Microsoft saying, yeah, sure, we can do that, or Amazon go, yeah, we can do that. And you don't want that. You want to know why, how, and what's going to take to actually get you there. And let us help you out do that, because that's what we want to do.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, that looks like it's the end of our questions here. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. And again, if there are any questions you wanted to ask and didn't get the chance to answer, please feel free to reach out to us at events@otava.com. And with that, I'd like to give you back some time in your day. So appreciate everyone and have a good rest of your day.
Have a good one, everybody.